Hello, Make Idaho Better followers. Time for another analysis post. Let's get this screen share going. All right. First things first, if you don't know what Make Idaho Better is, it's the easiest way for you, yes, you, to be a part of state and local solutions. You might feel like you're not, you're just one voice and you're not being heard. Nobody really cares what you think. That's not true. People care what you think. There's not a good way for them to basically get it. Every way there is, except for Make Idaho Better, is really expensive and tedious, and it's a pain in the butt for you. With only a few minutes a week, you can respond to surveys that go directly to Idaho leaders that can make decisions on this stuff. We make your voice heard and help you make a difference, and we make it easier for leaders to help us. So if that sounds good to you, click the Do Your Part button and join our email list. This is how you get the surveys and the results to the surveys and all of our other good stuff. It's typically only 1 or 2 emails a week, so it shouldn't be too much. All right. This week, last week and this week's analysis is about the Internet Access Survey. So this was done in collaboration with the Idaho Commission for Libraries, because internet access, especially in rural Idaho, is really important and often missing or slow or too expensive for a lot of people. And that means that there's a lot of people that aren't connected on a regular basis. That makes it harder for libraries to kind of deliver services and get a really good sense of where they should, allocate resources. So we're helping out with that. And this is the page with all the information about the survey. So the questions are here if you want to see how they were worded. The overall results are here. They're public. That's how we do it with Make Idaho Better. You can check those out. Looks like this. You can scroll through all of them and see what everybody said overall. And then the link to the analysis is here, and that's what we're going to be talking about. All right, I'm going to hide the main takeaways for now. We can come back to them, but I don't want you to know the punchline without the buildup. So the analysis posts are all about going below those overall results that you saw on the other page. So that's where I can overlap questions and find which types of people are answering similarly and differently, where the agreement and where the disagreement is. Knowing this stuff helps us have more context, but also really helps leaders get a sense for where the landmines might be and where they might not, and how to approach those things. So we got a table of contents here. If you want to skip to a section, don't want to read it from top to bottom, you can use your find bar to search the heading. I already explained how these work, and we talked about the survey already. Here's the link to that survey page. Now, first, we got to talk about demographics. You should always be thinking about who are the people that answered this survey when you look at findings, because that helps you get a sense of, is this like maybe everybody in Idaho would think this? Did they hear from equal portions of different groups? Or was it really biased in one way or another? And we can still learn a lot from that, but maybe it only really applies to certain types of people, not everybody. So I always show this at the beginning. So we heard from more women than men. Not all of our surveys have more participation from women, but it seems like most of them do. I think women just care more in general. From age, we heard from across the whole age spectrum, definitely more kind of in the middle between 30 and 60 than teens and 20s and 70s and 80s. And when it came to county, we heard the most from Ada County, but from many, many other counties as well. We'll go deeper into some of the county stuff below. All right, so I wanted to start off with some context with this survey, which how often do you use the internet? Is it constantly like me? Probably an hour doesn't go by where I'm not using the internet in some way, shape, or form? Or is it, maybe daily, weekly, monthly, less than monthly? So all of our survey respondents said normally on a daily basis or more. And most of them are constantly. So, okay, we heard from some people that are very digitally connected. I think there's a little bit of bias here in that we're not seeing some more people in these categories, even though I'm guessing those would be small groups. We're not hearing from them. So these are people that are using the internet a lot. Keep that in mind. All right, now I wanted to segment that by age, because I actually would have expected that older folks don't use the internet as often. They're not digital natives, as you might hear them said, like millennials and Gen Z are. So I broke it down by these groups of respondents, and still, it's most age groups that are, every age group had the most in this constantly using the internet answer. Though here it looks like maybe there's something to older folks having a higher propensity to use it, not quite constantly, but multiple times a day. 50s, 60s, and 70s groups, had a little bit higher percentage here, but still most of them were constantly. Okay. All right, let's get some more into some details here. So we know how often you use the internet, but how do you use it different ways? Can you use it at home, on a phone, like a smartphone, at work or school, or at a public place like a library or a coffee shop? And almost all of our respondents could use them all of the different ways, though at work or school was the least. And I'm guessing folks that are retired, well, if you're blue collar, you probably can't use the internet at work unless you're on your break, potentially, and maybe that they would think of phone for that. But also, if you're retired, you might not have work or school, then maybe you would answer no. So here's how this looked. It looks a different way, like proportionally how many people answered yes or no for each one. And at work or school being the highest no category, about 15% said they couldn't do it there. Okay, let's keep going. For each of those four ways, how often do you, so we know how many kind of can access in those ways, but how often do they? So it's definitely most often at home, no surprise there to me. But public places is pretty rare compared to these ones in the weighted average. If we look at it kind of like the same kind of proportional way we were before, you can see, so red means you never use the internet in these different ways. Orange monthly, dark green is daily. So public places, work and school and public places had the most of people that never use the internet there. And only a few people are using internet daily in a public place. That is a lot, Going to the library on a daily basis. I guess you have to in college or something, or if you work at a library. But I was kind of surprised that over half of the people don't use internet in a public place more often than monthly. So, but okay, whatever. Moving on. Okay, now this is the important question. This was what the Idaho Commission for Libraries really wanted to know about. They don't really have great data to know kind of what percentage of people have access to internet in different parts of Idaho. Apparently that data is kind of spotty. So my suggestion was, well, let's ask people from those places in Idaho what their estimates are of how many people aren't accessing the internet. If we average that, then maybe that'll be a pretty good estimate. So this is how everybody answered kind of the weighted average view. So it looks almost tied, but I think that at a public place is kind of the most accessible thing in some of these places in Idaho, and maybe depending on where you are, the closest public library might be your best option if you can't buy it at home or cell coverage is pretty poor. You can't do it at work or school. But yeah, this view isn't helping us a ton. Let's go back to this kind of a view. And this view really is like, whoa, there's a huge range of answers on all of these. It's almost like equal amounts of each answer. So people that said that 5% or less of people in their county are not accessing the internet in each place, compared to 30% or more are not accessing the internet in these places. So this isn't a very helpful view either. This is the view we want. So right here, this is by county, and these are averages. So everybody that we heard from in that county, what their average is. And we've got the sample size here that shows how many responses we got from each county. So this can help you have like a grain of salt for like Hawaii County. Hawaii County, there's 30%, the highest rating of people saying that aren't accessing the internet, but we only heard from one person. So like, it's not put as much weight in that as say like Bonner County. We heard from 10 people and still they said they had a pretty high rate of people not accessing the internet, 27%. So those are kind of the ones that to me are the biggest concern ones that have kind of a high rate of not accessing, but there's more than we heard from more than one or two people. So the ones that kind of stood out to me are Bonner up here, Bingham. There were 4 from Bingham and 26% not accessing. Nez Perce was 24 and Idaho was 24, and we heard from 7 and 8 people in both of those. Those, I'd say, like, those are kind of concerning. Those are high rates from, several people, so that the averages would have moved if somebody had a bad guess. So this is worse than I thought, actually. I thought we'd be more around like across the board, kind of like 10 to 20, not 20 to 25 to 30. But yeah, I've lived in Boise most of my life, so I'm not exposed to what it's like in some of the other places, besides this research, of course. Okay, now let's kind of put this in perspective. So if you didn't have internet, if you weren't able to access it, how big of a change would that be in your life? How much would it change your life? Pretty much everybody said, 70% said a great deal. And the next biggest popular was a lot. So there's only a few people that said not at all or a little bit. Though I'm surprised that anybody would say not at all or a little bit if everybody that responded to this survey said that they are using the internet on a daily basis or more. To me, that makes me think it would change it more than a little bit. So yeah, break that down by age. And we can see that there's the proportion of people that said a lot, though it's smaller than a great deal, kind of increases as you get older. So to me, that's like saying that maybe the older you are, the less kind of viscerally reliant on you might feel. After all, you lived potentially a lot of your life without internet access, unlike if you're 30 or younger, maybe you've had it your whole life. Yeah. All right, this is my favorite question of the survey. Let's have some hypotheticals basically showing how important internet is to you. Basically, what would you give up before you'd give up internet? Like, let's think about some trade-offs. Would you give up junk food or drinking or smoking? Most people would give those up before they give up internet. But those are kind of things that most people want to minimize in the first place, so we can discount those a little bit. And then there's kind of the next two, which are local gatherings like church or sports, or an acquaintance, where about half of the people might give that up. Not yes, but maybe. This one in particular, local gatherings, surprised me here. The old criticism, like, get off the internet. You're disconnected from the real world. To me, people that are saying, yeah, they might give up local gatherings is like, yeah, I do want to give up the real world and, for this access. Or I would if I had to anyway, which is interesting. And then you got the next tier, the third tier, where most people would not give up these things like regular hygiene, a job, a friend, a best friend, a relationship, or a marriage. But some people would. Some people put yes for all of these things. So that's even more than me, but not by much. As a very internet reliant person. So this is all fascinating. Um, I actually wanted to hone in on that local gatherings thing and see if it was different by our age group. And we didn't hear from a ton of people in there. I mean, we heard from a lot of people in their 60s. We didn't hear a ton of people in their 70s or 80s, but proportionally, they were the highest to say yes, they would give up local gatherings. So I don't want to draw too much into this because maybe it's because it's a small sample size. But there is one interpretation of, maybe as people age, some of them are, kind of disconnect from communities of some sort, or, their friends or family might be dying off, and maybe they're less likely to get out there in general. So, and maybe they find most of their connection online then. So maybe they feel like there's less to give up because they're already less connected. So maybe that's one interpretation there. All right, now let's reflect on what are the best things about the internet. There's a lot of good things out there, but I want to know what people thought were the best ones. And there's a clear winner here: access to information. And to me, this one it totally makes sense. It's almost the foundation of all these other ones. The freedom and flow of information helps you connect with people, express yourself, and it gives you entertainment options, yada, yada, yada. So the least valuable one was expressing yourself, which I thought was interesting, that it was so low. I would have thought maybe a little higher. When I broke that down by age, I didn't see very many meaningful differences here except expressing yourself. That small group of 70 and 80-year-olds that we heard from ranked this higher on average than all the other groups. Don't want to read too much into it again, but that's interesting, and I think worth noting, because I would have expected that they would care the least about this one. Because I don't know if you ever hear like the generalization of the grumpy grandparent that's like, oh, they think they're special. They're some kind of special snowflake trying to express themselves all the time. Who cares? They share too much. So because I've heard that from people before, I would have expected, younger people care more about expressing themselves and older people care less about people expressing themselves. But it was the opposite here. So interesting to me. Now let's talk about the worst things. This didn't have as like a clear winner like the best things did. There's a slight edge for data security risks, but increasingly polarized viewpoints and fake news came close behind that. The least one was weakened self-image from comparisons. I thought this data security risk thing is interesting because that wasn't what I put as the first. But I wanted to look at this by age and check this out. Looks like the older you get, the higher proportion of the higher people prioritize data security. To me, that totally checks out because, for a lot of older folks, we get obsessed with this idea. Like, my data's at risk. I don't have privacy. People might know something about me. Versus, to generalize on the other end, young people hear about, a new hack, a data breach, whatever. They're just like, meh. They basically assume my data is not private anyway, so it's not freaking me out. And that kind of shows in here. That's like kind of pretty rare to see a trend like that smooth. So I think that's kind of stands out to me. And then, all this together, does the internet make your life better? Let's put it all in perspective of like, is it good or bad? How good or how bad? And we've got the most popular answer here was better. Not much better. So that to me shows a little bit of hesitation. Like, I definitely realize there's good and bad that comes with the internet, but on balance, it's better. Versus the much better might be like less hesitation. Like, yeah, it's way better than, maybe there are bad things, but they pale in comparison. Whereas this one's maybe more measured of an answer. And only a few, less than 5%, said their life's worse because of the internet. So it's a very positive, sentiment. And then I wanted to look at it by age one last time, since it's our favorite kind of segmentation dimension here. And what do I even say from this? I don't even see much. Oh yeah. I said that teens, 20s, and are basically like the least to say to be kind of mediocre. It's about the same, pluses and minuses even, or worse. So to them, they're together more likely higher proportions of much better and better. And maybe that's easy for them to say because they're digital natives. They've never really lived without it. So to them, it's like, electricity, maybe even. But this is a pretty noisy graph. I don't know if there's a whole lot in here to grab from that. So that's all from quantitative analysis and charts. Next are the comments. So I always ask what gets too much attention about this topic and what doesn't get enough attention about this topic. And there's always fantastic comments. I'm not just saying that. I always learn a ton, and some people take a lot of time to articulate a thought. Like some of these are pretty long. Some of them are really long. Where's a good, really long one? This one's long. Look at this one. People really kind of think out an idea, and it's really valuable to see other people's ideas in their own sentence structure, construction, like their own words is valuable. Okay. And if you do not think that what we found is legit, that you don't buy it at all, you think that we didn't hear from enough of the, big enough variety of people, you could be right. And the solution is not to write off Make Idaho Better as, not good research. The solution is for you to participate as well, to raise your voice and help us try to get more of those voices you think that are lacking. Because the more participation we get, the more valuable, the more positive our impact can be, the more we'll learn. So please share, subscribe and share. And lastly, the things that stood out to me, that there are counties that have a lot less internet access than I thought. I was kind of disturbed by that. Second, there actually wasn't that big of differences across age as I thought there would be. The big exception of this being kind of how people thought about data security. I think that really stood out and seems to be kind of a relationship. The older you are, the more you care about that, which passes my sniff test. So that's all. Thanks for listening, and make sure you subscribe if you haven't already. Talk to you later.